The air of deep uncertainty that has for so long dominated Afghanistan does not seem to disappear soon. While the United States is looking to keep troops in Afghanistan past a May 1 deadline, Taliban stand firm on the February 2020 peace agreement, asking the US to strictly adhere to the mutually agreed deadline. Meanwhile, Afghanistan is witnessing a constant surge in the violence with no clear end in sight for a war that has turned into a stalemate. Have a look.
The United States began a war in Afghanistan with an aim to rid the country of Al-Qaeda's threat and topple the Taliban's regime weeks after the Al-Qaeda killed almost 3,000 people in the 9/11 terror attacks. 2 decades later, Joe Biden now faces an anguishing choice over whether to withdraw the last US troops from Afghanistan by May 1st. Biden now says meeting the May 1 deadline for troop withdrawal will be tough as per the deal made during the Donald Trump administration. But he also predicts US forces will not stay in the country much longer.
It's going to be hard to meet the May 1 deadline. Just in terms of tactical reasons, it's hard to get those troops out. So what we've been doing, what I've been doing, and what Secretary Blinken has been doing, we've been meeting with our allies, those other nations that have NATO allies who have troops in Afghanistan as well. And if we leave, we're going to do so in a safe and orderly way. But it is not my intention to stay there for a long time. But the question is, how and in what circumstances do we meet that agreement that was made by President Trump to leave under a deal that looks like it's not being able to be worked out to begin with? How's that done? But we are not staying a long time.
Biden's comments came after Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin made an unannounced visit to Afghanistan earlier this week and held talks with Afghan President Ashraf Ghani. The two sides condemned the increase in violence in the war-battered country and stressed that lasting peace is the main solution for the current situation in Afghanistan.
That process of reviewing the conditions that have been met or not met is ongoing, and as you've seen with our efforts in Doha, and so I don't care to comment on that. I won't comment on that. But what I will say is that it's obvious that the level of violence remains pretty high in the country. We really like to see that violence come down, and I think if it does come down, it can begin to set the conditions for some really fruitful diplomatic work.
There has been a surge in violence, with the Taliban continuing to carry out attacks targeting government leaders, security forces, and civilians. A recent UN report indicated 3,035 civilian deaths and 5,785 injuries during 2020, with the Taliban held responsible for almost 45% of casualties. Observers also say that the Taliban have not yet pledged to cut ties to Al-Qaeda and other terrorist groups threatening, as the February 2020 agreement called for. Meanwhile, the Taliban has warned there would be severe consequences if Washington did not stick to the agreed timetable, further raising pressure on the fragile peace process.
We had 18 months of negotiation with the Americans, and they agreed that they will withdraw in 14 months. And the time is now going to end at the end of April and 1st of May. And they should go, because if they do not go at the end of April, that means they continue. After that, it will be a kind of a violation of the agreement. That violation would not be from our side, but it would be from their side. So in that case, if there is action, of course there will be reaction.
The reality is, whether or not President Biden withdraws all US forces by May 1 in accordance with the US Taliban agreement of February 2020, Afghanistan is likely to spiral into more violence. There are reports that Ghani has already rejected the US administration's new peace plan that calls for an interim government and will soon be announcing a counter-proposal that calls for a democratic procedure with new elections in the next 6 months. But the Taliban immediately rejected Ghani's proposal, terming it as scandalous.